If you're in the market for a new laptop, I want to give you a few reasons why you might want to consider a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro over something else. Now, I realize, of course, before I get into this, that there are people out there who are strong Windows fans who don't like Apple for one reason or another, and that's perfectly fine. But if you are open to looking at options, I want to give you a few reasons why you might want to consider a MacBook over something else. So the first reason that you really ought to consider a Mac as your next laptop is battery life. Battery life in Mac laptops is phenomenal, and I have been really impressed with the battery life in my MacBook Pro. Now, I've got a Dell XPS 17 here as well, and it gets me up about 4 or 5 hours of battery life on a charge, which is okay depending on what I want to do with it. But that's only if I have it in the power saver mode and battery saver mode within Windows, and I have the screen brightness down, and I'm not doing anything too intense graphically, and no Premiere Pro, no After Effects, no Blender, none of that. It will work for about 4 or 5 hours if I'm lucky. Whereas the MacBook Pro will work for me through a whole evening of editing a video or writing, doing graphic design work, just browsing the web, and it works beautifully on a charge, and I don't have to worry about where my charger is. So that's a really cool consideration. If you are looking for a laptop that you can take with you, not have to worry about where your charger is, go to a coffee shop, go to your living room and sit in the chair, not have to worry about where the charger what got put last time or where the power outlet is, then I think that you will be really impressed with the Mac. But that leads me to my second point here. Now, that is this. I have noticed that when I unplug a Windows laptop, it does not tend to work as well as it does when it's plugged in. And that, of course, will depend on the model, and it will depend on a lot of factors there, what you're doing and what programs you're running, your hardware configuration, that sort of thing. But on my personal Dell laptop here, I've noticed that when I unplug it from power, it's not nearly as fast as it is when it's plugged in. Now, why is that? Well, the CPU and the GPU in a laptop require a lot of power, and that's true with a Mac or with a Windows laptop. But if the battery in that laptop is not able to provide as much power as those components need, then they can't run at full performance, right? Which makes sense. So I don't know what Apple is doing with their Macs, but I have had no performance issues unplugged with any Mac that I've ever owned. But I have had performance issues with every Windows laptop that I've owned unplugged. So your mileage may vary, but if you are someone who wants to work for a long period of time away from a charger and work at full performance, a Mac is definitely the way to go. If you care about the quality of the screen of your laptop in terms of brightness and resolution and color gamut, then really a Mac is the way to go, especially if you don't have a whole lot to spend. Now, years ago, I would not have said that. I think that would be kind of a crazy thing to say, that the Mac would be the cheaper option if you're going for something good. But here we are, I guess. But Apple has done a really good job of making sure that even their least expensive laptops have excellent screens. Now, the MacBook Air, which is an IPS screen, it still has in that computer a DCI-P3 color gamut screen. So you can cover a vast majority of the DCI-P3 color gamut, which is great for video editing, for graphic design, or anything that requires really good color accuracy. Whereas on the Windows side, you go spend comparable money on a Windows laptop, and chances are you're going to get something that has maybe a more or less 100% sRGB color gamut coverage, which is okay for doing things like web design and gaming, writing, that sort of thing. But if you are doing really intense design work, like maybe you're editing photos, you are working on a video, that sort of thing, then you are going to want to have a screen that is more color accurate than not. And on the Mac side, you can get that. So I have been very, very pleased with the screen in my MacBook Pro for various things. And even this screen here, which is a 4K screen, this one here only has an sRGB coverage on the color gamut, which is okay. But if I want something that's really color accurate, I'm always going to look at my MacBook Pro over here, because that is going to be a much better option for design work if I really care about color. So if there's one thing that I really don't like when I use a computer, especially a Windows laptop, is fan noise. And fan noise is a natural part of the computer having to cool itself down, which, makes sense, and I'm glad that it can do that. But fan noise is really obnoxious when I'm trying to watch a TV show or a movie, and I'm just trying to, edit something in Word, or even working on a graphic in Affinity Designer, or especially if I'm working in Blender, that sort of thing, then the fan noise can be really obnoxious. And even if I'm just sitting here at my desktop, the fan noise from my Dell XPS can be so obnoxious that I don't even want to use that for recording these videos because it will be recorded on the microphone. And there are certain things I can do to edit that out, sure. But the MacBook Pro, well, I'm actually recording with the MacBook Pro right now and nothing. It's quiet. I love that. This computer does have 2 fans in it for cooling as it needs to, but I've rarely ever heard the fans run, and that is a really nice thing. Now, I can, of course, make the fans spin up if I'm doing a long video export from Adobe Premiere or working in the Adobe Media Encoder, that sort of thing, or rendering something in Blender, or if I'm using a program called Max Fan Control to purposely spin up the fans to keep the system cooler than it otherwise normally would be. But otherwise, the computer is almost always silent, and it's so quiet that I forget that it even has fans. And when it turns on the fans, I'm like, oh yeah, it does have fans. Cool. So I really love just how quiet the MacBook Pro is here. Now, the MacBook Air, if you go get a 13-inch or a 15-inch MacBook Air, those computers have no fans at all. So if absolute silence is important to you, then those are going to be really good options. But the Apple Silicon MacBook Pro line is really quite impressive when it comes to fan noise because really most of the time there is none. One thing that Apple does very, very well with the Mac is they will provide years of software and macOS updates. So that includes security updates, includes updates to the newest version of macOS year after year. And that is a really cool thing. Now, approximately every year, Apple comes out with a new version of macOS. So like macOS Ventura, Sonoma, and so on. And those are great upgrades every year. And they introduce new versions, so new features, new security tools, things like that. And features that you're going to want to use and try out. So for example, with macOS Ventura, we got the ability to use our iPhones as webcams, which is very, very cool. And I love that because the cameras in the iPhone is, well, typically more powerful than what's in a computer, which I appreciate, but that's a sidetrack. Anyway, but Apple supports their computers for a good long time, and I appreciate that about them. So if you are going into college or school and you want to ensure that you are able to keep that machine going for several years through school, or as you're starting your business, or you rely on the computer in your business, you want to ensure that it's staying up to date and has all the security patches, that sort of thing, then a Mac is a really good option for you. Now, of course, if you go buy a Windows computer, you're going to get patches and security updates too, but how long you're going to get hardware updates or updates for the drivers in your system, that varies. And Dell and HP and Lenovo typically do a pretty good job of providing updates for several years after purchase, but just how long that will be, well, that's going to vary between manufacturers. Apple typically supports theirs for 5 or 6 or 7 years or more, depending on the model. And I think that's a really cool thing. So that's a strong selling point for buying a Mac, in my personal opinion. Now, to be clear here, I am not at all saying that a non-Mac computer is a bad computer. Not at all. Now, I actually work in IT, and I like and use and recommend and have non-Mac computers as well. And in fact, my Dell XPS here is running Windows, and I like Windows. I use it. It has a lot of advantages over macOS, and macOS has a lot of advantages over Windows. So it's important to think through your needs and your use case and think through what's going to be best for your budget and what you're going to want long term. Because a laptop is an expensive investment. By any metric, a laptop is an expensive metric. So, or is an expensive metric. A laptop is an expensive tool. So it's important to think through what's going to be best for your budget, your use case, and then go out and buy that. Not necessarily Mac. Now, I like macOS. I like MacBooks. They are great tools and they will last for a good long time. But go get the computer that will be best for you. Now, if you like the video, then please like it and then subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It will help me to grow the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.